to talk about is all of our lights, reflectors, and reflective tape. We'll start with our headlights. The lenses are clean, they're not broken or missing. Clearance light lenses and turn signal light lenses are clean, they're not broken or missing, and they're amber. Next, we'll talk about our side marker light lens. It's clean and it's not broken or missing, and it's amber. Reflective tape on the rear of our tractor. It's clean and securely attached. Reflective tape on the rear of the trailer. It's clean and it's securely attached. My clearance light lenses and my reflector lenses are clean. They're not broken or missing, and they're amber. My tractor tail lights, the lenses are clean, they're not broken or missing, and they are the proper color, amber. On the rear of my trailer, my reflector lenses and my marker light lenses, they're clean, they're not broken or missing. On the rear of my trailer, tail light lenses, reflector lenses, clearance light lenses are all clean, they're not broken or missing, and they're red. And the reflective tape on the rear of my trailer, it is also clean and securely attached. Kind of hard to open. Okay. Start on the passenger side. There's my dipstick, and shows that my oil level is at a safe operating range, and it's above the add mark. My coolant on the other side, it is at a safe operating level and above the add mark. My water pump, it's securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts. It's gear driven, operating properly, it's not damaged, and it's not leaking. My alternator, it is belt driven. It is belt driven, operating properly, and not damaged. There's no loose electrical connections and no exposed, broken, or burned wiring. My belts, alternator belt and fan belts. Belts are not worn, cracked, frayed. No loose fibers. They're snug, they're not slipping, and they have no more than a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch play at the center. Now I'm going to talk about my hoses. All my engine compartment hoses are not worn, cracked, frayed. They're not rubbing on other parts, and they're not leaking, and all the clamps are tight and not leaking. Then I'm going to look underneath my truck, and I can see that there are no leaks from the engine or the transmission. Go to the driver's side engine compartment. My air compressor, it is securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts. It's gear driven, it's operating properly. It's not damaged, and it's not leaking air or any fluids or oil. My power steering pump, it's located under my air compressor. It is gear driven, operating properly, not damaged, not leaking. My power steering gearbox, securely mounted to the frame. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. It's not damaged, and it's not leaking. My connecting links, arms, and rods that go from the steering box to the wheel are not cracked, bent, or broken. And the joints and sockets, which is the connection points at the ends, they are not worn or loose, and there's no loose or missing nuts, bolts, or cotter pins. Next, I'm going to go to my suspension system. Spring mounts and hangers, they're securely mounted. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and they're not cracked or broken. The bushings are not damaged or missing. The leaf springs are not shifted, cracked, broken, or missing. And the U-bolts are not loose, cracked, broken, or missing. And the shock absorber is securely mounted, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, it's not damaged, and it's not leaking. Next, I'm going to go to my air brake system. My lines, hoses, couplings, and fittings. Couplings and fittings are tight, they're not leaking. Lines and hoses are not worn, cracked, frayed. They're not rubbing on other parts, and they're not leaking, and they can supply air to the brake chamber. My brake chamber is securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts or clamps. And there's no dents or cracks, and they're not leaking. My slack adjusters and push rods, they're not bent or damaged, and there is no loose, missing, or broken parts. My pushrod stroke should be no more than 1 inch when pulled by hand with the brakes released. My brake linings are not worn dangerously thin and there's no oil or grease on them. And my brake drums have no dents, cracks, or holes. They're secure, no loose or missing bolts, and no oil or grease. Next, I'm going to go to my tires. My tires are worn evenly, at least 4/32 tread depth in every major groove, and there's no cuts or other damage to the tread or the sidewall. My rims and wheels are not cracked, bent, or broken, and there is no welding repairs. My lug bolt holes have no cracks or distortions. My lug nuts are all there, none are missing, and they're all tight. Sign of a loose lug nut would be rust trails. My valve stem, it is not cracked, bent, broken, or missing. All the caps are there, and I would check the pressure with the tire gauge. My hub seal and my axle seal are not leaking, and they're filled to the proper, and the hub is filled to the proper oil level. Next, we're going to go to the driver's door. The driver's window, it's not damaged and it has no excessive girth. My mirror bracket, it is securely mounted, no loose or missing nuts, bolts, or fittings, and it is not cracked, bent, or broken. My door and hinges, they're secure, they're not damaged. Seal is intact, and the door opens and closes from the outside. My fuel tank is securely mounted and it's not leaking, and the cap is tight and it is not leaking. My side box. In my side box, I have 3 red reflective triangles. I have spare fuses for this vehicle, and I have a fire extinguisher that is securely mounted. It is fully charged. Now I'm going to go to my service area. Talk about my air and electrical lines. They are not cut, cracked, chafed, spliced, taped, not dragging on other parts, not leaking, and there's no steel braid showing on the electrical cord. My glad hands are firmly seated, they're locked in place, they're not damaged or leaking. My electrical plug is firmly seated and locked in place at both ends, and my air lines are securely connected to the truck. Catwalk and steps. Catwalk and steps are securely mounted to the frame. They're not damaged, no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and they're solid and free of objects. D, my drive shaft. It is not cracked, bent, or broken, and the couplings are secure and free of debris. E, my exhaust system. My exhaust system is securely mounted. No loose or missing nuts, bolts, or clamps. All the connections are tight. There are no severe dents, cracks, holes, or leaks. Signs of a leak would be rust or carbon soot. Tractor frame and cross members. My tractor frame is not cracked, bent, or broken, and there's no cracked or broken welds. My cross members, they're securely mounted. They're not cracked, bent, broken, loose, or missing. Suspension system. Differences or exceptions on my suspension system. I have a torsion rod. It's securely mounted. It's not damaged, and there's no damaged or missing bushings. I also have, on my drive axle suspension, I have airbags. I have airbag mounting bolts on the bottom and an airbag mounting bracket on top. My airbag is securely mounted, it's not damaged, and it's not leaking, and it's fully inflated. My airbag mounting bolt, it's securely mounted, or it's tight, and it's not damaged. And my airbag mounting bracket, it is securely mounted, it's not cracked or broken, and there's no loose or missing bolts. It's not damaged. Now, on the like items on my suspension system that I would inspect would be, I would inspect all of my spring mounts and hangers, the bushings, the leaf springs, the U-bolts, and the shock absorbers, just like I did on the front axle. Now I'm going to go to my air brake system. I'm just going to list all items. They're all like items. So on my drive axle air brake system, I would inspect all of my lines, hoses, couplings, and fittings, the brake chambers, the push rods and slack adjusters, and the push rod stroke, and all of the linings and drums, just like I did on my front axle. On my duals, exceptions or differences would be minimum 2/32 tread depth in every major groove. Since these are duals, they're evenly spaced and they're not touching. There's no debris stuck in between my duals. And here I have a wheel seal and an axle seal, and they're not leaking, filled to the proper oil level. The like items that I would inspect would be my tires. I would inspect my tires, the rims and wheels, the lug nuts, the lug bolt holes, and the valve stems. just like I inspected all of those items on the front axle. Next, I am going to, so those are 3 systems where I'm going to do like items. Next, I'm going to go to my 5th wheel, okay? So on my 5th wheel, my apron is not cracked, bent, or broken, and it is laying flat on the skid plate, and there's no gap. My skid plate is properly greased, and it is securely mounted to the platform. The platform is securely mounted to the mounting bracket, and the mounting bracket is securely mounted to the tractor frame. All of those parts that I just listed are not cracked, bent, or broken, and there's no loose or missing nuts, bolts, or pins. The release arm or release lever is in the lock position, and I know that because when you test, you go underneath the trailer and you look into the back of the skid plate, and you tell the tester, I can see that the locking jaws are locked around the shank of the kingpin, and they're holding the kingpin in place, and the kingpin is not cracked, bent, or broken. Then when you come out, you tell the tester, my 5th wheel is in the proper position so that my landing gear does not hit my tractor frame or my mud flaps when I'm turning. And since I'm here at my mud flaps, the mud flaps are securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and they're not damaged. Then I'm going to go to the nose of the trailer. The nose of the trailer has no bulges or cracks, dents, or holes, no loose or missing rivets, and it is capable of properly securing a load. Next, I'm going to go to my trailer frame, cross members, and floor. My trailer frame is not cracked, bent, or broken, and there's no cracked or broken welds, and there is no holes or other damage to the trailer frame, the cross members, or the floor. Now I'm going to talk about my landing gear next. My landing gear is fully raised, the crank handle is properly secured. There's no loose, missing, or broken parts. My landing gear support frame is not cracked, bent, or broken. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and there's no cracked or broken welds, and the landing pads are not damaged. Almost all like items on the rear of my trailer. The only 2 exceptions are, on my trailer suspension, I have a torque arm on the driver's side, or on the passenger side, and the radius rod on the driver's side, and they're securely mounted. They're not cracked, bent, or broken. There's no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and no damage or missing bushings. The like items on my trailer suspension that I would inspect would be, I would inspect my spring mounts and hangers, my bushings, my leaf springs, and my U-bolts, just like I did on my tractor axles. Now I'm going to go to my air brake system on my trailer. On my air brakes, all like items again, I would inspect all of the lines, hoses, couplings, and fittings, brake chambers, clamps, push rods and slack adjusters, the push rod stroke, and all of the linings and drums, just like I did on my tractor axles. My duals, since I have duals on my tractor drive axles, I would inspect in between the duals. I would inspect the tires, rims and wheels, lug nuts, lug bolt holes, and the valve stems, just like I did on my tractor drive axles. On my trailer, I have a hub seal and a wheel seal, not leaking, hub filled to the proper oil level. I would inspect the mud flap on the trailer, just like I inspected the mud flap on the tractor. My trailer doors and hinges are not damaged. They're securely mounted, and the doors open, close, and latch securely, and you have to open the trailer to show the tester that the trailer is empty and tell him that the trailer is empty. That's it.